don't think, oh, I'll call her later. Oh, she's tired and busy. Yeah, she's tired and busy, but I'm sure that person really wants to hear from you too and would really appreciate that check in, making sure they're okay. So that's my goal for y'all this week. Call your caretakers, call your loved ones, make sure they're okay. Oh, and actually, that's the other thing. Check in sometimes with the caretakers at the assisted living facilities. There is one in particular at my mom's that I love so much. And sometimes I can just see it on her face. And I just go up to her and I was like, are you doing okay? Do you need something? What do y'all need? And even the maintenance man, they work so hard. And, they're at my mom's facility. They're not allowed to take tips. They're not allowed to take monetary gifts. So I asked the maintenance man, I was like, what's your thing? Like, what do you want? He said, Dr. Pepper. That's what he wants. I was like, so guess what? I'm going to show up with a case of Dr. Pepper for that man. Hi, everyone. I'm Lexie Callies. Do you feel the squeeze of caring for an elderly loved one and school-aged children? Then welcome to the Sandwich Stories. Let's dig in. Hiya! Hi, everybody. It's Lexie Callies with Sandwich Stories. I hope y'all are having a great week. I wanted to talk today about checking in with the caretakers in your life. This whole thing with Gene Hackman and his wife has been really weighing on me, and it just breaks my heart once you start to hear all of the details of Gene Hackman's wife passing away from an illness, and she was his only caretaker, and then he passed away days after she did, and no one knew. And it just breaks my heart. I feel so bad for that family. But that made me start thinking about checking in on the people in your life who are caretakers. Caretakers are notorious for not taking care of themselves, not going to the doctor. Um, I fall into that category a lot of the times. I, for the longest time, did not go to the doctor. I missed doctor's appointments for probably a good 2 or 3 years. And my husband was really getting on to me about it. And I think part of it was because I was going to the doctor so much, first with my dad and then with my mom. And I just did not want to go to the doctor for myself. Also, when you're a mom, you're also taking your child to the doctor. And my husband has cornea transplants and lens implants, and I go to his doctor's appointments. Or like I've said in the past, when we've talked about advocating, if I can't go to his appointments, I do it over the phone. And so I think that's just it. I just did not want to go to the doctor for myself because I was just tired of being there for everybody else's appointments. But that's not good. We can't do that. As caretakers, we have to take care of ourselves. But who checks in on you? That's the thing. I have good friends. I see them regularly. We check in on each other. But I think back to our lives in the United States, especially, are changing. The way we live our lives everything is changing. Back in the day, your great grandparents either lived on a farm or lived in town, and they lived there till the day they died. Same with my grandparents. My grandparents um, first lived in Chicago. Then, because of my grandfather's job, they went to New York. But then they came back to their childhood area in the suburbs of Chicago, and that's where they lived for the rest of their lives. My grandfather built a house for my grandmother in a neighborhood that was new in 1967. They moved in 1968. My grandmother lived in that house until it was no longer safe for her to live there. So she lived in that house for 40 years, actually, maybe closer to 50. But that's what people did. Her next door neighbor. I just found out not too long ago that my Grammy's next door neighbor passed away not too long ago. And she was the only first owner of that house until her children sold it and someone else new lives in there. So after 50 to 60 years, someone new is finally moving into the house. That's the way it used to be. And it's not that way anymore. I think about my mom. She and my dad, we lived in the house that I grew up in for 20 years. They owned that house. But when my dad retired, he retired early at 53. My mom and dad, we had originally lived in Austin. They both wanted to move back to Austin. They both said they wanted to retire in Austin and be in the hill country because that's what they loved. So they built a house. And when my dad retired, he lived there. And my mom went back and forth between my childhood home and the Austin house. And she did that for quite a while. The neighborhood I lived in as a kid, we were a good, tight little neighbor. Like good little neighborhood, great neighbors. Everybody knew each other. I had my friends in the neighborhood that I grew up with. Everything was great. And then my parents moved down to Austin, and they moved to Sun City, Georgetown, which was really great. They thought it'd be a great community because everybody would be retired. There was a golf course. There were so many activities, all the things my mom really wanted. They made some friends, but then they realized after some time, they were the youngest people living in that neighborhood. Everybody was so much older because my parents retired so young. On top of that, when I got married and my husband and I started talking about having a family, my mom was told my dad, "We're moving back to DFW. I will be in that child's life as much as I possibly can," because her grandparents were that way. Her grandparents were a bus ride away. She could get on the bus. She spent a lot of time with them. She was really close with her grandparents, and she wanted the exact same thing for my soon to be children. And so, they moved back here. Well, they built a beautiful house, but yet again, it's a new neighborhood. They're the oldest people in the neighborhood now. And the other people in the neighborhood are young, they're busy, they have young families, or there were quite a few people from other countries that had multi generational family houses. So my parents really weren't as connected as they had been when they first lived in DFW. And so, who's going to check in on my mom? I found that as an executive and then a professor at the university, my mom's identity was being an executive or being a professor. And that was her life, even when I was a kid. And so she's not as if she was making really close relationships outside of work. And that is what I find was probably the hardest thing for her as she got older, is because once she retired from IBM and then once she retired from the university, what's her identity? Who are her friends? Who are going to check in on her? And you've moved around and you're not living in the neighborhood that you once lived in. And so I think it just makes it so hard. And that is why I feel with this incident with Gene Hackman and his wife, um, you know, I think it affects everybody. They lived in a beautiful, huge house in beautiful Santa Fe. But if Gene Hackman's wife was his sole caretaker, who was checking in on her? Who was checking in on the fact that she was okay? She was taking care of herself. And I think we need to start thinking about that in our lives. Um, if you are a caretaker for somebody and you are the sole caretaker for that person, who's checking in on you? Who do you have set up in your life to check in on you, saying, if I call you and I don't hear back from you in X amount of time or X amount of days, I will either come to you or send the police for a welfare check or have the neighbors the neighbor next door, have them come over and knock on the door and check on your house or check on you. Make sure you're okay. I think that's what we forget as caretakers. Like I said, we don't take very good care of ourselves physically, mentally, or so wrapped up in caring for other people. We just don't want to take the time for ourselves. So we need to, I think, really think about who we're going to have in our lives that will check in on us. So I guess that's what it is. What does that look like? If we're not living in the same neighborhoods for 60 years with close family and friends around all the time, who's the friend that's going to check in on you? you know, I luckily live in a house right now that I told my husband, I was like, we are never moving ever again. This is my forever home. And there are quite a few people on my street who are our friends who have said the same thing. So unless something massive happens in our life, this will be all of our forever homes. And I know that we will all be checking in on each other, making sure that we're safe and sound and nothing bad has gone wrong. But for those who are not in those positions, maybe they've retired. Maybe they lived in Chicago and they retire to Florida, and their family is still up in Chicago. Who's checking in on them? One slip, one fall can change someone's life in an instant. And when you could be in a position where you had a very active life and you had friends and one thing happens and you're now in a position where your loved one, your spouse, whomever it is the one taking care of you. And then who's checking in on them? Do they have the friends that they had before you moved? Do they have the network of people or people they feel that they're comfortable enough to call upon? And I think we really need to start talking to our loved ones, especially the ones who are caretakers. Who are these people in your life? What do we need to do to set up a check and balance system and make sure we're all safe? Because, like I said, I don't know all the details. It's just what the news tells us that Mr. Hackman's wife passed away first from an illness. And then a few days later, he passed away due to heart failure and advanced dementia. And they were not found for quite a while until a maintenance man came. And that just breaks my heart. I would not wish that upon anybody. I don't care who you are. You don't want that to be the situation. And so we need to set this up. I have decided that as my life moves forward, of course, my husband is will be my caretaker, and I definitely would be his. But I have some best friends, and I'm going to make sure if they become caretakers that I'm checking in on them or ask them to be the people who check in on me. And if you call me and I don't answer within a day, whether it's a text or a phone call back, come find me. Because that could be the difference. Maybe that one day could be the difference between something devastating happening and maybe something minor that could be fixed easily, maybe a day or two in the hospital, but then you're back to normal and can go back to your normal business. I really think that's what we need to focus on. And so go out there. I encourage all of you to go out there, find your person who is a caretaker, check in on them, call them. Don't let it slide. Don't think, oh, I'll call her later. Oh, she's tired and busy. Yeah, she's tired and busy, but I'm sure that person really wants to hear from you too and would really appreciate that check-in, making sure they're okay. So that's my goal for y'all this week. Call your caretakers, call your loved ones, make sure they're okay. Oh, and actually, that's the other thing. Check in sometimes with the caretakers at the assisted living facilities. There is one in particular at my mom's that I love so much. And sometimes I can just see it on her face, and I just go up to her. I was like, "Are you doing okay? Do you need something? What do y'all need?" And even the maintenance man, they work so hard, and they're at my mom's facility. They're not allowed to take tips. They're not allowed to take monetary gifts. So I asked the maintenance man, I was like, "What's your thing? Like, what do you want?" He said, "Dr. Pepper." Like, that's what he wants. I was like, "So guess what? I'm going to show up with a case of Dr. Pepper for that man because he deserves it." Or the nurse that helps takes such good care of my mom. What does she need? What does she like? It's just the token appreciation, but then also just checking in to making sure they're okay. And the few times that I have done this with the caretakers, it comes across as if it almost takes them by surprise because they weren't expecting anybody to notice, because most of the time people don't notice. So, yet again, go out there. That's your goal this week. Check in on your loved ones who are caretakers. Make sure that they're okay. How can you help them? What things can you put in place to check in on them on a regular basis and make sure that they're safe and sound? Okay, guys, song of the week. I couldn't come up with one this week on my own. My mind went blank. I don't know. So I asked a very good friend of mine and asked them what their go-to song is to lift their spirits, make them feel good when they're down. And my good friend picked Timbaland, "The Way I Are." She says that is her go-to song. I know it is not in the same vein as some of the other songs I have picked in the past, but that's okay because I would never pick this song. It's not in my wheelhouse, but I love my good friend. And if she says this picks her up, we have a great time together. So maybe I need to put this song into my repertoire of pick me up songs. All right. Timbaland, "The Way I Are." Go check it out. Have a great week. Check in on your loved ones, and I'll talk to y'all next week. Okay? Bye, everybody. Love you. Thank you so much for listening to Sandwich Stories. I really hope you learned some new things and enjoyed it. If you did, tell a friend, tell your mom, tell your sister, tell your dad, tell everybody you know to also listen. Maybe they'll learn some new things, how to help each other out, and find us at Sandwich Stories Podcast. Thanks so much.